Hello, welcome to another Fantasy Premier League video. My name is Steve, and today we're taking a look at a community question that came in about whether we should be aiming to bench boost during AFCON and the Asia Cup, as we will be flush with cash if we sell Salah and Son. First of all, I will be addressing the Norwegian elephant in the room in my team selection video, which I'll be releasing on Friday New Zealand time sometime in the afternoon. So if you're interested in the Haaland discussion, make sure you subscribe to the channel to be notified when this drops. And additionally, I will actually release the excuse me, still getting over the illness that had me out last week. Additionally, I will be doing a release dedicated to a wildcard meta strategy analysis tomorrow. And if you're not aware, meta is a gaming term which stands for most effective tactics available. So those of us that still have our wildcards in our back pocket do need to have some solid plans in place, as the blank in game week 18 and the AFCON and Asia Cup impacts can be attacked quite heavily with this chip. So again, make sure to subscribe if you want to be notified about that content coming up. But back to the topic at hand. Coming off the back of a week where Salah and Son smashed it in FPL, and we're actually the only two players that seem to haul in any points in game week just gone, it seems like a pretty apt time to discuss what we should be doing with Salah and Son when they depart for AFCON and the Asia Cup in game week 21. So it's not too far away, and something that we do need to start planning for, as there is actually quite a few transfers involved in dealing with these players. Now, these two players are currently in most teams, and I think they should really probably be in everyone's team right up until they depart. So I think you should still have them in your squads in game week 20, which will be the last fixture that they will play in the Premier League before they head off for international duty. So Arbitrary Tack asked this on a recent videos comment, which will be the main discussion point for this entire video, and he asked, is it a good idea to plan a bench boost during AFCON with the funds liberated from Son and Salah, or will it make it too difficult to bring them back afterwards? So, but before we get into this question, if you're not already a subscriber to this channel, consider subscribing. It really helps the channel out. And if you enjoy the following content, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Right, so on screen underneath me, you should see, does that line up well? Oh, yeah, it lines up pretty well. You should see some key dates around the Premier League and departures for the African Cup of Nations. So game week 20, I think the first game kicks off the 31st of December. This will be the last Premier League game that Salah and Son and many other players will play. But I'm just focusing on Salah and Son because they are so heavily owned and very key players to have in our squads. There's actually quite a lot of rest periods excuse me, throughout January. So the 7th of Jan, the week where there is the 7th of Jan, there's actually no Premier League fixtures. And then game week 21 kicks off on the 14th of January. And all AFCON and Asia Cup players will miss game week 21. The first games in these relevant competitions start between the 13th and the 14th of January. So that is match day 1 for the various competitions. And the last games for the group stages of these competitions, so match day 3, are actually played between the 23rd and the 26th of January. So that's AFCON in the Asia Cup. And back in the Premier League, there is a rest in the week of the 21st of January. So while all these games are actually being played overseas, there's actually 2 full weeks of rest, probably to just make sure that the Premier League teams don't get too depleted by their best players going overseas. Game week 22 kicks off on the 31st of January for the Premier League. And in those various competitions, the round of 16 teams are playing between the 28th of Jan and the 1st of February. Game week 23 kicks off on the 4th of February, and the quarterfinal teams will be playing the 3rd of Feb to the 4th of Feb. So Salah and Son are in Egypt and South Korea, and they are all making it through to the quarterfinals. Excuse me. Obviously, they will be missing the game week 23. So game week 24 kicks off 11th of Feb. This is around the time of the semi-finals. And game week 25 will be the last game week that any AFCON or Asia Cup player will miss, and that's only if they happen to make it right through to the finals. Sorry, is 24th, game week 24, but game week 25th, everyone should be back. So, just to recap that last point, sorry. The semi-finals and the finals are actually quite close together, being played 7th to 8th of Feb in and around. Game week 25th, the game week 25 kicks off on the 18th of February in the Premier League, and everyone from AFCON and the Asia Cup should be back by that point. So, on Salah and Son, they play for Egypt and South Korea, so Egypt being AFCON and South Korea playing in the Asia Cup. And these 2 teams are actually expected to make pretty deep runs into the competition, as they are some of the stronger teams in the competition. So we can assume that, Salah and Son will definitely miss game week 21, probably miss game week 22, as that would be the round of 16, and we would assume that they will probably at least make it through to the quarterfinals and probably even further, which could also mean that they miss game week 23. Now, if both teams make it to the finals in each of the competitions, then they will be out for game weeks 21, 22, 23, and 24, coming back in game week 25. Now, Salah and Son are way too expensive to leave sitting on your bench while they're away for their international cup competitions. And additionally, I actually think that these players are all too important to not buy back immediately when they become available for their Premier League teams again. Now, this could be game week 25, but this could be earlier, depending on when they get knocked out, if they get knocked out of the various competitions. So when we do sell these players, we are going to be very flush with cash in our squads, but we do need to be careful about spreading these funds around, as it will take quite a few transfers to obviously spread the funds, and then if we're going to be buying Salah and Son straight back into our squads, we will then have to reverse the investment of those funds that we put into our teams. And so we could end up spending quite a lot of transfers during this period. And we just, if you don't think that Salah and Son are that high up your list in order to be getting back into your squads, then potentially some of this isn't as pertinent to you managers. But I think most managers probably think that Salah and Son are borderline essential players to have in their squads when they are available again. So in game week 21, everyone will have their second wild card available to them. So you could plan to buy back Salah and Son on a wild card. So we could look to sell Salah and Son invest the cash around the place for the few weeks while they're gone, and then use our wild cards to bring Salah and Son back in, and this could be a viable strategy. However, I think the wild card will probably be better served later in the season, used closer to the doubles in order to stack your team with players from those teams that end up doubling, probably somewhere in around the game week 30, 33, 34, 37 sort of vicinity. Obviously, we don't know when the doubles are yet, but it's usually in and around those weeks. But it should be said that based on my own personal way of playing, I think that the most powerful play, if you can achieve it, is to play your wild card after a bench boost so that you can put all of the cash back onto the pitch. So if you manage to build up a bench across a series of weeks and then you have all this money distributed amongst your team, you use the bench boost chip so that you've got a very strong bench as part of the bench boost, then wildcarding out of that team in order to downgrade all the players on your bench and put that money back into your starting 11 usually is the most effective tactic if it all lines up with the way that the scheduling happens for the teams. Right, so meta-analysis for the bench boost. Now, typically, in most seasons, a very common strategy is to use your bench boost chip in a big double game week, as we can usually fill up our benches with cheap players that have 2 games. Now, this usually means that benches are consisting of 2 defenders, obviously a second goalkeeper, and either 1 midfielder or a forward, depending on whether you play 3-5-2 or 3-4-3. Now, if you are a rare manager who plays with 4 at the back or even 5 at the back, so some sort of 4-4-2, 4-5-1, or even a 5-4-1 formation, then most of what I'm about to discuss probably won't make much sense for you, but I'll continue from this point forward, assuming that you're a manager that plays with a 3 at the back system. So you've got 3 defenders on the pitch, 2 defenders on the bench, and either a midfielder or a forward as your final bench spot. Now, a traditional bench boost in a double game week has the advantage of being able to have 2 very cheap defenders, a playing second goalkeeper that all have very good clean sheet potential across the 2 games in a double game week. So if, just as an overall strategy, if you manage to fill up your bench so all 4 players have 2 games each, then your 4 players will actually earn 4 points each just from appearance points. And that means that your bench boost chip basically starts off at around 16 points, assuming that none of those players get yellow cards, minus points, or don't make it to the 60 minutes. So let's just assume you filled up your bench with nailed on assets that don't really get any yellow cards. They should get 16 points across the double game week. And then on top of that, any clean sheets or attacking returns gets added on to your 16-point start position. Now, in recent seasons, we've had an overwhelming amount of cancellations that have resulted in teams with additional fixtures that need to be scheduled into a double game week, meaning we basically had our pick from most Premier League teams, as the double game weeks have been huge. So last year we had the World Cup, which resulted in a lot of doubles that needed to be scheduled later in the season. We had COVID cancellations, we had the Queen's Memorial, we had all sorts, which means games were dropping out and that there were lots of fixtures that needed to be rescheduled later in the season, and that resulted in really big double game weeks. Now this year is actually quite different. So far we've only had one fixture that has been missed, but that fixture has already been caught up, so we've already had that one double game week for Luton and Burnley or something like that. Can't remember exactly who it was, but we do have in game week 18 a blank, but only two teams are blanking. That's Man City and Brentford. Now that does mean that there will be a double game week planned in sometime in future for Man City and Brentford so that they could play each other in the catch-up match. But that's only two teams that will have a double at some point in future. Now, depending on how teams do in other competitions, though, we will have a few blanks coming up, meaning that we will have some double game weeks that will need to be scheduled in. But again, this is going to be for way less teams than in previous seasons. So what we might find out later in the season, say in around game weeks 30, 34, somewhere around there, we might find out that there's only a couple of key teams that have doubles based on how far they make it in other competitions. And so we may only have a couple of teams to choose from in those double game weeks. So we might only get to choose from, say, I don't know, Arsenal, City, Liverpool and Spurs. You might only have 4 teams that have doubles in the future, as opposed to I think there was a double game week last season where every team doubled apart from like 4 teams or something like that. So you really had your pick of any players across any teams. And so planning for those doubles was a lot more flexible. Excuse me. So this will actually make it quite a lot tougher to go with the strategy that we have had in the past of trying to find a couple of cheap defenders at about 4.5 odd million to sit on the bench for our bench boost, as well, typically the teams that are going to end up doubling are usually the stronger teams, as those teams make it further in those other competitions. And so we probably won't have like a Bournemouth with 4.5 million defenders or a Nottingham Forest with 4.5 million defenders doubling, because it's more likely going to be the Arsenals, the Cities, the Liverpools, the Spurs that end up making it further in those competitions. And so the defenders from those teams are a lot more expensive. So we could have very reduced double game weeks and a smaller selection of teams to choose from, and those teams probably have more expensive assets that we would be looking to invest in. So the conclusion that I have come to for when to use the bench boost chip this season kind of revolves around the other chips. So if we say only have 2 double game weeks in future, let's just say hypothetical, game week 34 is a double and game week 37 is a double, we will want to be using the triple captain chip in one of those doubles, meaning we can't use the bench boost chip in that same game week. So one of those doubles will definitely be taken up by the triple captainship. I mean, if you are one of those people that want to use a triple captainship in a single game week, this might not apply to you. Or if you've already used your triple captainship, then obviously this may not apply to you either. But the masses will be looking to triple captain in a double game week. And Haaland with his double of whoever plus Brentford is looking like the probable go-to for everyone to just chuck the triple captaincy on Haaland whenever that double is announced. Now, there has been a lot of talk that the double should be dropping into game week 20, but we are getting very close to game week 20 now, and it doesn't look like that double is going to be dropping in there. And so we probably assume that double will be pushed out into some sort of very future game week at this point. So additionally, I would even go so far as to say is it's probably going to work out to be a more meta strategy to play the free hit chip in a double game week this season, rather than using it in a blank game week, as the blanks will be much smaller this year and much easier to navigate. So last season we had a blank where I think there was only like 6 teams playing, and so using the free hit chip in that week meant you could put out a full squad of 11 without having to worry about that there was only 6 teams to choose from. And it was obviously a lot harder to build a team for such a big blank, and so using the free chip in those blanks was a more meta strategy last season. But I think the blanks this season are actually going to be really tiny. We'll probably only have a couple of teams missing out. Now, obviously, if we had like City, Liverpool and Spurs all miss out in the same week, that could be quite hard to navigate without a free hit chip, as we could have a couple of City players, Son, Salah, maybe a couple of defenders from Spurs and Liverpool as well. I mean, that could become quite difficult. But it's looking like the blanks are probably going to be a lot smaller, and so it should be a little bit easier to navigate, and therefore we may wish to use the free hit chip in those double game weeks in order to load up on players that have doubles further along in the season. And so if there's only, say, 2 double game weeks, one in 34 and 37 in my hypothetical, we're probably going to be using the triple captain chip in one of them and then the free hit chip in the other. And so my conclusion this year is I think it's going to be a very viable plan to use the bench boost in a single game week this season. Now, whether or not we're going to do this across the AFCON and Asia Cup is what we'll go into now. But even if you don't agree with me on whether or not you should use it during the period when AFCON and the Asia Cup is on, I think you could probably plan to use the bench boost in any single game week for this season of FPL. So for AFCON and the Asia Cup, the bench boost options. So what I've got on screen is my fixture ticker. I'm not too sure why that screen's showing like that. It's better. So what we've got is it's starting from game week 21, which is the first game week when none of the players are available, and it's ordered by difficulty up to and including game week 25. Actually, it should be game week 24, because everyone should be back from AFCON and the Asia Cup by game week 25. So there's really only 4 game weeks in here where we will be very flush with cash, having sold Salah and Son. Right, so if we have a look at game week 21, it might just be easier if I just order by one game week here, so you can just see obviously would, if we were going to bench boost, it's only in one game week. But so we can see the teams that have the easiest fixture in game week 21. We can see that Liverpool face Bournemouth away. So this could be a great shout to have, say, a Trent and a Robertson on our benches to be doing a bench boost in game week 21. So this is the whole theory behind downgrade Salah and Son to a couple of other midfielders. We have a whole bunch of extra cash. We use that cash to upgrade the two defensive spots that are on the bench, assuming you always play with three at the back, remember. You could go for the likes of a Trent and a Robertson. Robertson, by the way, should be back. Did I have this down here somewhere? Let's just see if I can bring this up. Yeah, I should have probably mentioned this already. So Kevin De Bruyne is due back approximately the 27th of December, which is game week 19. So Kevin De Bruyne will actually be available across this period of games, assuming that he doesn't have any setbacks with injury. Robertson is due back around about the 14th of January, which is game week 21, which is this Liverpool versus Bournemouth fixture. And so putting a Trent and a Robertson on the bench as part of a bench boost in game week 21 would actually be a very powerful bench boost. Game week 22, if we roll forward a little bit, we can see that Man City face Burnley at home. Now, Man City's defensive assets are a little bit more expensive, but not as expensive as the likes of Trent, Trippier, Robertson, Virgil. But, you know, the likes of John Stones at like 5.5, if you were upgrading your bench member to some sort of asset like that, a couple of Man City defenders could do well in this game week. If we roll forward to, say, game week 23, then Newcastle have a Luton at home, and so it's having someone like Trippier on the bench as part of a bench boost could be very viable as well. But Liverpool, like teams like Liverpool, so the likes of Trent and whatnot, are away to Arsenal in 23, and so we probably wouldn't be looking to bench boost with someone like a Trent and upgrading these funds or anything like that. So you would need to have a look at this set of 4 game weeks to identify a game week in which you'd really like to attack. But building that bench, as well as getting rid of Salah and Son, and then having to buy Salah and Son back, is a hell of a lot of transfers. So, if I just bring this up on screen, now does that fit in the window well? How does that look? Okay. So what I've put up here is every team will be different, but assuming that we use 2 transfers in game week 21 to sell Salah and Son, we would also need the following transfers. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up Andy's team from Let's Talk FPL. The reason I've done this is twofold. One is you're probably a lot more familiar with Andy's team as to someone like my team. But 2 is he doesn't have any of the expensive defenders in his squad. And I'm aware that quite a lot of you out there probably don't have Trents and Trippiers in your team already. So he's kind of got like a perfect team to try and show why this might actually be a bit too difficult to do across the AFCON and Asia Cup period. So what it's set to here is game week 21. Now we're assuming that he's already banked enough to have 2 transfers in the bank for game week 21, with Salah and Son still in the squad, so that they had have played in game week 20. Obviously his team's going to be much different by this point, and so the rest of the players that are here might not be as well set up for this period, but just assume that the rest of the players around the place do have good teams because he's managed it that way. So you sell Salah and buy someone like De Bruyne because De Bruyne is back. And then you sell Son and buy someone like Bruno Fernandes because miraculously Manchester United have started to play some good football. And you've spent your 2 transfers in game week 21. Now obviously you can't bench boost in 21 because you've just spent your 2 transfers in this game week. Now you could look to take a hit and do it in 21, but let's just assume that we're not using any hits while we do this. If we roll forward to game week 22 and then say, who were we aiming for in 22? It was, oh no, we'll go to 23. We'll assume that we're aiming for 23, which is to bring Trippier in for Luton. So 22, he does nothing, goes forward to 23, and then he upgrades Taylor to Trippier, which you can do, and still have 1.6 million in the bank, right? As we're flush with cash at this point. Let's assume Cash is actually playing and Archer has been upgraded to a decent player. Or maybe Archer's still in the squad, right? So at this point, you could actually bench boost with a relatively strong bench. I mean, Cash is 4.8 million. You still have an extra 1.6 million to spend if you wanted to upgrade Cash or Archer at this point. You've still got this extra transfer here. So let's say we'll do this with just the 1 transfer in of Trippier, because I will explain what happens if you try to get Trippier and Trent in on your bench. Just becomes too many transfers to deal with across that 4-week period. So we'll just aim for the Trippier. You've still got Cash in here, which is a 5 million defender asset playing Sheffield United away. It's a very decent bench defender to be bench boosting with in a single game week. And Archer has Aston Villa at home. Now you could look to upgrade Archer to a different striker that has a really plum fixture in this game week, maybe for a hit. Well, that'll probably involve a hit at some point a little bit further down the line. But this is game week 23, and then game week 24 you need to sell Trippier again. We'll take him all the way back down to, I don't know, who's a 4.5 million option down here, maybe like a Mitchell or someone. I mean, whoever, right? So you get rid of the Trippier funds in game week 24, and then game week 25 is when all AFCON and Asia Cup players are back, and so you would need to be going Bruno Fernandes back up to Salah, which is one of the free transfers. I mean, I've obviously not downgraded Trippier enough by doing this. How's the money got lost there? I'm not sure if that's completely accurate, but De Bruyne, and then we go De Bruyne down to Son for the 2 transfers in game week 25, and we're all back to square. We've done our bench boost. We've bench boosted with Trippier and a 5 million asset on the bench. We've used our 2 free transfers at this point, and all looks relatively well and good. Now the problems occur when Son and Salah don't make it all the way to the finals and come back before game week 25. So 25 is when everyone's definitely back after the finals. Now if Salah and Son make it all the way to the finals, this could actually be viable, right? But the other issue is for that whole 4-week period, you've basically spent your transfers getting rid of Salah and Son, buying Trippier, immediately selling Trippier, and then immediately buying back Salah and Son, and therefore the whole rest of your squad has to be extremely well set up for this entire 4-week period while the Asia Cup and AFCON is on. So if your team is in a prime position at the start of that run, sorry, that should start from there, you could look to spend all of these transfers on doing your bench boost through this period. But if you get any injury in your squad, it's going to lay most of this to waste and enforce some hits. Now, taking a hit to do this might actually be a pretty meta play, because if you have a Trippier for a really good game, and say your Archer with that extra 1.6 million that we had left over went up to, say, a Solanke or someone, and he had a really good fixture and came away with a double-digit haul. Trippier came with a double-digit haul, and Cash kept a clean sheet. I mean, you're looking at like a 25 to 30 point bench boost at that point from a single game week, and that's not even counting your backup goalkeeper. So it could be very viable for this whole strategy to work. However, given everything that, like this, basically the stars have to align for this to all work without using your wild card and without taking any hits, I don't think this is actually going to be the way that I will go. However, this whole exercise did have some advantages. It shows us what's going to happen if we spread our funds too far and wide across this AFCON period while we don't have Salah and Son in our squads. Salah and Son could be back at the drop of a hat, because obviously as soon as it goes to the round of 16, it's knockout. They only need to lose one game, and then players are coming back into the Premier League, and you'll need to be reacting to buy them back into your FPL squad pretty much that game week. So you're going to need those transfers up your sleeve. This exercise has taught me that I'm now comfortable that I'll probably be bench boosting in a single game week this season, and I will probably be looking to build towards a bench boost over a number of weeks, and then wildcarding out of that bench boost somewhere in the game week 30 plus period of the season, in order to use the wild card after a bench boost to set up my team ideally for the doubles that will be happening in game weeks 34 to 37 or somewhere around there. So that's a pretty long and relatively complicated video, so I hope I didn't lose you all too much across that. But if you did enjoy this video and got something out of it, press the like button and consider subscribing. And if not, that's all good too. I appreciate you watching. And until next time, cheers.